Okay, so now I want to talk about Roman architecture. This was their main form of art. This was very difficult. A lot of the masterpieces that they put forward, we've talked about the Pantheon, we'll look at that a little bit more in a little bit. These great works of art that still stand today are masterful in their creation, but not only that, they show a lot of information and a lot of technical skill that would have been used in this construction that was also used in other parts of their society. Engineering was huge in Rome. They had lots of really important discoveries. Their aqueducts were these large sort of bridges that would transfer water from one point to another. They even found out how to use their aqueducts to transfer water from a point that was lower than the city that they were delivering it to. They would use these mechanisms, sort of like ladders, that made it artificially steeper. Lots of really interesting innovation. They also had indoor plumbing. A lot of people like to say that there was Roman pipes that were made out of lead. They never used these for drinking water for obvious reasons. They weren't even that stupid back then. Lead pipes were buried underground and used to move sewage through cities into sluices and other areas to be discarded. This use of lead for plumbing makes a lot of sense. The lead is heavy, it's not really usable for much else other than maybe slingshot, and it's malleable, so you can easily form it into pipes to fit into the ground. They also had central heating in some of their bigger buildings. They would have a small area where a coal fire could be pressed, and they would have corridors that led to different rooms. They had lots and lots of engineering innovation in war. As we spoke about earlier, the mathematical needs for firing something like a ballista, the on-the-site construction needs for being in a wooded gale, looking on a city that knows that you're coming when you need to chop down trees to make towers, you need to make battering rams, you need to make anything to get up over the walls. The more technical and the more heavy it is, the better it will be to use. Again, another example, when Julius Caesar was attacking, it wasn't Alesia, it was one right before it, he had them build these large dirt ramparts that were actually corridors, because he knew if he made them into towers and they marched them forward, they would shoot them down before the towers docked on the walls. So they just made tunnels, and they put dirt on top of the tunnels as they went. It took weeks. It took lots of precise construction and tunneling, because when you're underground digging a hole, it's very hard to tell if you're going in the proper direction. But they made it into this large ramp that led straight up the wall. Round earthworks, as it's called, doesn't sound that impressive today, but when you think about, you need to consider the compressive strength of the dirt, you need to figure the area that's going to be under, you need to figure out how much oxygen needs to be able to be in the tunnel so your men don't die rushing in. There's a lot of really complex thought that went into these war maneuvers and these war machines that I don't think gets properly looked at today. There were some concepts for ancient Roman construction that could actually still be very useful today. These are the Vitruvian virtues. Vitruvius was a great engineer around the time of the empire. He reformatted the way that houses were made. He had a lot to say about construction and reconciling beauty with utility. He was a very successful engineer. He was considered by some the first Western engineer to have great works that continue to this day. And he left us three virtues, or three highest goods for construction. These are firmitas, utilitas, and venustas. That is, to be solid, to be useful, and to be beautiful. Now, why would it be important for architecture to express these three traits? Well, first off, to be solid can be more simplified down to well constructed. A building that has to be constantly repaired or that could fall over or injure people isn't a very good building. It exists to house and to protect, and it should do those things well. Useful, it needs to serve a general or mass purpose. The aqueducts, they were large, they were imposing, they were beautiful works of architecture, and they moved water to people who needed to have it. The ancient Egyptian pyramids, in contrast, housed one dead person. This isn't very useful to the average Roman. It's barely even really useful to the guy who built it, since he's only using it when he's dead. As far as he knows, he might not even be using it at all. So the usefulness needs to expand the society and to help the average person. And it needs to be beautiful, but in this context, it doesn't necessarily mean aesthetic the way we might think. It means it needs to be in harmony with nature. Vitruvius likened human construction to bird nesting. The way that they gathered their materials, they carefully crafted, they made themselves blend in and look like a part of actual nature. When you look at a huge steel skyscraper, it gives you a very different feel from looking at a bird nest. Vitruvius believed that it was human nature to build, just as it was birds' nature to nest, and that this construction should reflect that natural instinct which man already has. So, how did the ancient Romans build? This is a huge topic. I want to take a look at a few of their important bits that they contributed and how they were integrated into the Roman society. One of the biggest and most important innovations in Roman construction was their development of concrete. Now, concrete did exist in some form or another before the Romans, but it needed to sit for a long time. It needed to have structure while it was sitting. It had very low tensile strength while it was wet, and overall it just really wasn't all that great. The Romans, as we've mentioned several times, were innovators. They saw this concrete, they saw what it could be, and they wanted to get there. They may not have come up with the idea of concrete themselves, but Roman concrete would surely end up being the best concrete. In some regards, you may even say it's a little bit better than what we have today. Today we reinforce all of our concrete with steel rebar. The Pantheon manages to stand without any reinforcing steel bar inside of it, and it has for 2,000 years. So maybe it's just the way it was constructed, maybe it was the fact that they didn't have steel rebar in the ancient times, or maybe it's the fact that they were a little bit better at something than we are. Who knows? The Romans called their concrete opus cementicum, and it was made of, just as most concretes are, of an aggregate and a binder. The aggregate is the bits of stuff that end up making the hard wall, so they would use bits of stone, bits of clay, bits of ceramic, bits of rubble from old buildings, things like that. And the binders that they would use would be gypsum or lime. They also really like to use this stuff that they called, it was like a volcanic ash that they got from some of the volcanic areas in Italy, and it helped to defend the cement from the sea and the salt water that got into the air. It made the buildings much more resilient to the salty air and the salty environment of the Mediterranean, and was very important in the preservation of these buildings to this day. Because of the quick setting of the Roman concrete and the low plasticity of the wet concrete as it was sitting, they didn't need as much to reinforce the object that they were constructing, and so they could go for grander, larger, and much more impressive feats. Here we're going to look a little bit more in depth in the Pantheon. This is a very fantastic building, one of the very first domes built. It's actually a full concrete dome attached, and you'll notice it has a little hole on the top. The pressure inside needs to be relieved, and the pressure was relieved up. There's actually a ball of wind circulating sort of through the temple, and it prevents outside air from entering. So when it rains, you don't actually get any rain into this building, even though there's a huge hole in the top. This was a very impressive feat for the day. It's a very impressive feat even today, honestly. If you had a hole in your roof, you'd probably have stuff falling in. And they never had this problem because of the specific construction and the realistic development of the dome on top, because it is actually a half ball or a half sphere, I guess would be the more correct term. It produces this wind current that disallows any inclement weather from coming in the top. And you can see from these pictures, again, they still have the columns on the outside, but it is an enclosed inner area. You can't enter from any side. This is more definitely a Roman temple. You see the roundness as opposed to the Greek love for the golden ratio and the golden rectangle. It's its own thing, and not only that, it far surpasses the construction of the previous days. The dome itself is made out of concrete. They had to set it on a giant inflatable ball and then bring it up to the top. Lots of cranes and lots of really fancy innovation to get this here. It is a feat of the ancient era, and it only could have been produced by the Romans. So, to get a little closer look at how these constructions were done, who built them, and why they came to be, we're going to do a little thought experiment. We're going to say that you are the great engineer and future emperor, Hadrian. Hadrian is known for several feats, most for his construction and the buildings that he gave back to the people of Rome. He is one of the 5 good emperors, as they are called. He did a lot for his society and for his people, and as we'll see, it wasn't easy, and if you make the right decisions, Rome will be greater than ever before. So, as Hadrian, you are a young Spanish aristocrat in Spain, which was at the time part of Rome, burying yourself in Greek study and philosophy. Education was minimal in ancient Rome, and the development of linguistic and lawful concepts were put in front of philosophical and sort of loftier ideals. It was the idealistic and the dreamer type that would have gone the Greek route, and you, as the young Hadrian, are captivated by the works of old. Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, all of these names ring in your head. You're not sure why, but you think it's very important. Through political dealings, your family comes into contact with the emperor. A few marriages, a few feasts here and there, you could really get some things done. And upon contacting him, they show their beloved son, Hadrian, to the great man. The Emperor Trajan sees you and your ambition and your desire for knowledge, and embraces you as a potential successor for him. The only problem, there are several. This doesn't guarantee you any sort of spot, this only guarantees that you have a chance. But you're the great Hadrian, and a chance is all you're gonna need. So you decide to join the military, except the standard senator would go for maybe 2 terms, get a safe spot in the back, and just sort of ride through the military to say that they did. You, however, decide to do 3 tours of duty, and you're not only going to be a cavalry member, which is very common for the upper class, you're also going to be a siege engineer. These are some of the most important men on the battlefield. These are the ones who figure out how to get people up and over walls, how to get across bridges, how to ford rivers, how to really get the military moving and working at all. The importance of the engineers in the Roman times and the Roman military can't be stressed enough. That you, the great Hadrian, see this importance and decide to pursue it as far as you can. Between your cavalry and your engineering feats, you also run for minor offices. This starts to attract the attention of the emperor, and as he becomes older and his succession becomes more tangible, he begins to shun you. He sees your ambition, and he sees people responding to it, and he doesn't really want to let go. He fears your usurpation, although you've given no sign of doing any such thing, and his empress actually endorses and promotes you to the point of attempting to marry you into their family. Things are looking pretty good until Hadrian sends you as far east as he can. He goes along as well, and these eastern campaigns continue for a time until he falls sick and has to go back west. You are now left effectively in command of the Eastern legions, the most important and most potent of all the Roman legions, poised to take over by force or by diplomacy. But you're the great Hadrian, and you don't want to do anything too rash. News is brought to the Eastern Front, and unfortunately Trajan is very sick and will probably expire soon. Your campaigns draw to an end, and you decide to station your legions in the east and allow them to drill and to stay where they are and to head back for further instruction or possibly your last word with Trajan. You're still not on the best footing. His empress adores you and lavishes accolades upon you, but your last speakings and dealings with Trajan didn't go all that well. He's not the sort of guy to allow another person with high gravitas to walk around him. He was a pretty good emperor. There is some dispute as to whether or not him and his supporters made the previous line look worse than they actually were to make themselves look better than they actually were, but this is neither here nor there. You are the great Hadrian, and you know that with your engineering expertise, your military expertise, and your burgeoning political career, that you can bring the people the society and the order that they need. On Trajan's deathbed, you find him, and you come across him and have a conversation. Historians aren't entirely sure how this worked exactly, but something happened, and he died, and you are declared his heir. You succeed the throne, and first move to quell any voices that may be against your rise to power. Luckily, you made the smart move in going to the military first, and your legions are steadfast and ready. This isn't a very good way to portray yourself to the people, though. You've been campaigning in Dacia, in Germania, in the east, and you have lots of loyal legions that could, if need be, come and pacify the people. But what kind of leader rules over a bunch of terrified individuals? You're Hadrian, and you decide the people need to understand that you're there to make their lives better. So you take the wealth, the resources, and the power that you've gained through your campaigns and through your victories, and bring it back to the people of Rome. Your military expertise and engineering, which had once been used to put up towers and to tear down walls and to destroy, is now used to build and to construct and to edify. You put up the Pantheon, serving as a major center for all of the Roman religious figures, and actually a building that will be in continuous use for the next 2,000 years. Not only do you put up just any temple, though, you put up the grandest and the most unique in Roman history. You dedicated your life to the military arts, and you found a way to take those military arts and transfer them to the high or the fine arts. This transition from war to peace wasn't accomplished as successfully by many other emperors as it was under Hadrian, and the transition from a warlike economy to a more peacetime economy is also successful. The people see you, they see your military victory, and they see your civil victory. They accept you as emperor, and under your great stewardship, the Roman Empire will continue to turn for another day. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, then make sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest content, or why not share these videos with your friends. We are doing really good. I'm having a great time doing these. I hope that you guys are too. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Next week, we will be taking a look at Byzantine times. Their art suffers because of their iconoclasm, so it might be a little bit more general of an episode. I'm really interested in that time period, though, so it should still be a good time. So make sure to tune in next week for that. And again, I hope that you enjoyed. But until next time, remember, Ave Imperator.